hideous sun demon. Ah! Ah! Happy Halloween!
Hi, and welcome to CompletelyMachinima.com, to the podcast Completely Machinima. If you hadn't guessed it by now, the theme is Halloween is
Halloween!
here upon us.
Yay!
I am Phil Rice, and with me are our co-hosts, Ricky Grove, Damien
Hello.
Valentine, and Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
Hello.
Today's episode, Ricky is going to be talking to us about a Halloween, well, somewhat Halloween, a film in the spirit of Halloween. Take it away, Ricky.
Right. One thing I want to mention is that every year we do a big yard haunt in our yard in our driveway. And this year is going to be particularly fun because we managed to finally get something we've been trying to buy for 3 years. And that's a huge 12-foot high skeleton that Home Depot sells.
Got it. That's
Now,
awesome.
They announce it for the next day, and then within about 3 to 4 hours, they sell out. So we went on their list, and we had some friends keeping an eye out. They sent us a notice that it was going to go on sale, and we nabbed it within 5 minutes.
Nice.
So this year, there's going to be a 12-foot high skeleton with lights and all that stuff. Plus, I made some handmade headstones. We've got a new little ghost animation. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll include some pictures on our
Please
blog,
do. That'll be
so
great.
people will
I
enjoy
wanna
it. It's
see these.
really a lot of fun. Yeah. My film that I chose is a little bit of a nostalgic choice. I know there are lots of interesting Lovecraft adaptations that were made in machinima. Horror has been a really good tradition in machinima. I'd love to maybe do an article on some of that sometime for the blog. But I found myself just entranced by the short little, of all things, a Warcraft machinima made in 2008 by Olibith Kieran Tor. I generally don't like Warcraft machinima. I think it's just the style of animation and everything. But this one just really got me because it has such sharp black humor. It's called Little White Pony Inn. And I love the fact that it's very much like a Grimm's fairy tale, in that most people tend to think that Grimm's fairy tales are somewhat sentimental, that they have these little happy endings and they're these little fantasy stories. Well, this one really captures the essence of the Grimm story tales, because it's a funny story about a person, possibly a wizard, sending someone out to deliver a message or to help someone, and the ending of it is just completely unexpected. You don't. There's this kind of cutesy Warcraft feel to it, but underneath there's a nasty little thing. The twist ending is very much out of Twilight Zone or Thriller or one of those things. I just loved it. And it's short, it's clear, it's well edited, it's funny. It's an unusual pick for me, but I delighted in it. What did you guys think?
I think the Warcraft style, like you said, it's very cutesy, and pretty much all the Warcraft machinima is, because that's the style of the game, really works in favor of this film because it makes the outcome unexpected, because it's not what we expect something with that visual style to have. I don't want to say what that ending is, because this is a short film, it's going to be very tricky to talk about it without giving it away. But I thought it was great. It was funny, and I think they used the Warcraft in a way that Warcraft isn't usually used.
Yes.
And that's always great to see as well.
Yes.
Because it's not a game that's designed for this kind of storytelling, and they decided to do it anyway because they figured out how to do it, and I think it just worked really well.
It's nasty.
It's a great pick.
It's a nasty little film.
Yeah.
Bill, what'd you think?
I loved it. I'm familiar with Olibith's work. He was one of the more prolific Warcraft machinima makers during that time. This would have been right around during his peak. He's a very funny and nice person. And yes, basically some of the funniest stuff or more interesting stuff that I saw out of Warcraft was his. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think that the black and white look was really interesting. Some of the ways that he chose to do certain scenes. My favorite is where the character's running across the screen. It's almost like the old Flintstones kind of feel to it, where the background is going by and the person just running and stuff, just perfectly centered on screen as the scenery goes by. So yeah, and just he was never afraid of dark humor, as this is a great example of. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I've seen so much of his work, and I had not seen this one, so I was very pleased to see this as your pick, and I enjoyed it very much. Yeah, good stuff.
I'd like to make a quick mention that he's also, the tutorials are somewhat old, but he's got interesting tutorials on machinima basics and a guide to creating machinima. They're all from 2010. And he's got a really interesting, at Warcraft movies.com, he's got an entire page that lays out all of the things that he's done. So I will have a link to that, and I encourage everybody to check it out. Tracy?
Yeah, well, okay, so I completely agree with you on the grim fairy tale idea, because to me it was very reminiscent of Little Red Riding Hood, but with some kind of evil family member who kind of intervenes and, you know, has this kind of like very dark, deadly twist to it at the end, which is quite surprising, I think. I didn't expect it, because I also hadn't seen this film. The visuals, and I was quite intrigued in this, because the visuals and the music have all come from World of Warcraft. And the fact that it's silent and in black and white only really partially mitigates, I think, some of the challenges that this kind of machinima faces, at least now from my perspective, because it looks and feels, I think, really quite dated now as machinima work. But I say that in a similar kind of way that you kind of look at old Chaplin and Keaton movies now. But I think what's kind of interesting to reflect on, and of course it's only 15 years old, not 100 years old. But I think that says something about the pace that game technologies have kind of moved on. I think unlike some other games, it's actually worth remembering that World of Warcraft didn't change its aesthetic from being launched in 2004 until the mid-2010s, just sort of 2016, I think it was, when it started to look a bit more modern. So overall, that game I don't think it stands up at all, really, to other games that we've seen kind of come out slightly earlier, in fact, than this, like GTA or Red Dead. I think the aesthetic style and I think those kind of games have probably stood up a little better than World of Warcraft has done. All of that said, I think it's a good story, and
Yes,
I think what
exactly.
it illustrates is that you can tell a good story in any medium. And once again, I think the thing that I've picked up on throughout all the films that we've reviewed this month, which all have this kind of horror theme because of Halloween and whatnot, all of them are driven by sound design and the drama of going to to look for someone in kind of mortal danger. They all kind of have the same sort of story, roughly. But this particular one is only partially silent, because the sounds of the hunter and the monster are actually included, and I would guess that's for added drama, even though the animations themselves are really quite clunky. For example, one of the things that we talked about a couple of weeks ago is the eyes widening in fear at key points of suspension.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, obviously they don't do that in this one, but what you do get is the camera zooming in to give the same kind of effect. I thought was really well done. So
Yeah, it's clever.
It's a different way of doing it, isn't it? But you didn't have that as a technique in these early machinima films. But I think the way that the character moves, World of Warcraft was a long time ago, really, for me and my brain. And I can remember a lot of these films, and I can remember that those movements, those kind of clunky movements, had meaning. Yeah. But I've forgotten what the meanings are now, which is why I think it's kind of not stood up quite so well as a game engine, really.
I kind of had the opposite of that, because it's designed to look like those old black and white silent films. So I feel like the dated graphics go really well with that. Because if you watch a film that is about 100 years old, that isn't a real silent film, the cameras are very primitive, so it misses frames, and they move in sort of even if it's a dramatic film, they have this comedic style of moving, and it looks old, and this works with it.
Well, that wasn't that aspect of it wasn't intentional. It was because they were projected they were shown at the incorrect frame speed, which caused a speed up.
Yeah,
which is why everybody goes, oh, well, why in this dramatic film? The true film rate for it, when it's done accurately, slows everything down and makes it clear.
Right.
Yeah. It's because we're used to that fast film rate that moves everything along so quickly.
Yeah, right. But to me, what's different here, I get what you're saying there, Damien, and I don't necessarily disagree with you on the complementarity of the black and white and the dated look and whatnot, but it's the fact that what you're looking at is a game, not a person, and that their sort of launching movements they definitely meant something in the game, but I just can't remember what it is or what it means now. So for me, that's where it fell apart just a little bit. But actually, I'd never seen this film before, so this was a pleasant surprise in many ways. And really quite a contrast to some of the others that we've reviewed this month, where the reveal, I think, is much more subtle than this kind of, yep, here it is, full on.
Isn't it funny that all three films that we have picked, because Phil picked an instructional film, all have twist endings that we can't really mention and say what they are?
Exactly. But Phil,
the dated engine on this, it didn't bother me, and I'm trying to, since you brought it up, I've been trying to figure out why, because it normally would. Maybe it's because this game, when it was new, was always a stylized versus realistic, and the two examples, the competing examples, have always been aiming for, Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption. They've always been aiming for realism.
Yeah.
And years ago they couldn't get as real, and now they can. But that's always been the aim since GTA went from 2D to 3D. That's what they've been trying to do. But World of Warcraft, it wasn't trying to look realistic. It wasn't even trying to look at like realistic fantasy world. It was
cartoony.
Yeah.
Design. So as such, I'm having a more difficult time being harsh with it, even though I've got a freeze frame open right now and I'm looking at it. Clearly it's low poly, right? And it's not just the stylized nature of it that shows the datedness. It's the low poly models. And the very limited set of animations, which when Ricky and I went to the 2006, there's a photo we've got that we'll maybe have to throw on the blog at some point. Someone took a picture of I, and Ben, and You're doing that World of Warcraft movement.
Yes.
There was some film that was there that was doing really well, and we were just laughing about, because there was that at the time, World of Warcraft, which had like 3 animations, and it just cracked us up. And the other was the movies, Lionhead's movies,
yes,
with these crazy, like, if somebody mocapped those, they need to see a doctor, really, really strange.
Yes,
Walk
yes.
across the street and it's like this. But the thing is it was intended to be fun and silly.
Very
When they
stylized.
made that game, they weren't trying to let's make this look like a real person walking across the street the way people do. No, this was almost vaudeville. It was
Yeah.
So, and I kind of feel like this game falls into that category. And so, yeah, how to judge that? Like, what would they do differently now if they were making this game with the same goals? The only thing that would be different is the poly count, but it would still be impossibly small waisted, large breasted girl characters and guys with gigantic heads and tiny bodies. Yeah. That was World of Warcraft. So,
I remember.
Yeah, it didn't bug me.
Reading I can't remember who it was. It's someone at Blizzard when they were about to release World of Warcraft. It was a long time ago, and they were talking about the design decision on the graphic style. And what they wanted to do was they didn't want to create a huge graphically intensive game that only a handful of people with supercomputers at home could run. They wanted it to be able to run on as many computers as possible, but they also wanted it to not age very quickly. So they opted for the cartoony style because it meant the system requirements would be fairly low.
It's more forgiving for that too. Yeah, it's more forgiving for the low poly models. Yeah,
and it wouldn't age because they're not too worried about the detail not living up to it.
Yeah, but my point is it's the movement that's aged.
No, yeah.
That's the bit I think that's...
Well, it was dated the day they released
it. Yeah.
Well, here's a question for you, Paul. What do you think this film would be better if it was keeping all the audio, keeping all the animation the way it is and the style, if it were redone in Unreal?
No.
Oh, no, definitely don't do that.
No.
I think
feel
if you did that...
I feel like this film, for me, falls into the same category as, doggone it, that Nintendo Switch game. We've reviewed several films made by it where the little characters...
Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing.
Animal Crossing.
Yes.
This, to me, falls in that category, that it's that really stylized, unrealistic characters serve this story well, I think.
But also,
I wouldn't be interested in this story if it were rendered with realistic looking characters and stuff.
No, me either. But also, I do think Olibith has got this really unique way. He's got a great sense of humor, hasn't he? Really dark sense of humor.
He's hilarious. Yeah.
And if you have a look at another film, which I was familiar with, called Le Terroriste, on his channel. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, he is so funny. Have another look at that, because some of the things that he was doing are that there aren't many machinima creators that can do what he's done. And I think this pick, Ricky, is one of those that demonstrates his really great sense of humor in the way that he tells the story. But have a look at others and you'll see what I mean with that kind of stylistic
We'll
approach.
be sure to put a link to his the site for him. Now, what happened to him eventually? He just stopped producing or went on to...
I'm not too sure.
Make contemporary. If anybody in the audience who's listening knows about Olibith and what's happened to him, let us know.
Absolutely.
That's an interesting thing about machinima, is that so many great filmmakers, after the machinima.com debacle and the interest died down in it, they're just sort of forgotten, So
some of them move on to jobs that they pour that passion into instead, I think. And some of them
just stop.
Have kids.
Yeah.
That'll do it. That'll be a horse tranquilizer in your passion, that's for sure. So
sure.
I'm still connected with him on Facebook.
Me too.
But I don't hear much from him. So I'll see what I can ascertain.
We'll give him a thumbs up. We love his work.
I'll make sure to let him know when this episode's out for sure.
Okay.
You've got another one for us, haven't you, Ricky?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention a sort of special a special recommendation. I don't want to go into a full review of it and everything, but I just thought it was an interesting Halloween pick, and I came across it in my research. It was called It Lives Within the Sea by Dominic Edwards. It's shot in Red Dead Redemption 2. There are some problems with it. It's slow. The storytelling is a bit hard to follow at times. Some of the scenes are clunky, but the atmosphere and the music and sound effects are just great. It reminds me of some of the best Lovecraft stuff, and it's worth a watch. So as just a special recommendation, I'd like to include that in our link. Did any of you get a chance to watch it at all?
I did.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely Lovecraft feel. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've never seen this game engine used in this way. And it really works well. I mean, yeah, there's flaws for sure, but yeah, I enjoyed it very much, and especially in the spirit of the theme of this month, it worked really well.
Yeah.
Me too. I mean, what I liked, I don't know what you guys thought. All the smoking at the beginning part of the film made me want to cough and splutter a bit. It was thick with it, and it just felt so you could cut it in the story. I mean, I thought, like you say, I thought there were a few problems with it. One was, I think, the levels with the sound,
Yes.
which were a bit of a problem. But the soundscape, other than the voice acting, was pretty good. But I think the voices themselves were a bit problematic. But these guys do a lot of Lovecraft type storytelling, and I hadn't even come across them before. So, these are definitely worth looking up on YouTube. I'm sure we'll put a link to it when we review.
Yes. Yeah.
When we do the notes and everything. But yeah, really, really enjoyed it.
And I was going to say, Ricky, that both of your films that you've chosen, they're made with games that you don't expect these kind of films to be made with. So this is another one where they've taken Red Dead 2 and they've made a horror film out of it, which is not what you expect. And again, I like to see that when you'd expect mostly westerns to be made, Western machinima to be made with Red Dead. So they've done something very different, and I like to see that.
Yeah, I wish more people would use Red Dead Redemption 2 to create machinima. I understand the barriers. Phil outlined his problems with trying to shoot in it. It does create a lot of work, but I think it's has so many interesting places in the world of Red Dead Redemption 2 that to me are evocative,
Very.
and they start putting story ideas in your head. The problem is that you can't necessarily realize your ideas about doing the story, because the technical nature of getting animation in and getting characters to do what you want them to do is really a wall, So
It's heartbreakingly evocative is what I would call it. It's heartbreaking because it cries out for stories to be told there, and there's not an effective way to capture them that's feasible at all. Yeah, it is. It's a real shame.
Be an example that Blizzard would have put a little more effort into making it easier to do photographs and video, or move the camera and bring in characters. They could have opened that up to a machinima community that I think would have just flocked to it, because it's such an interesting. What was that one guy that did some great? He's done it in all of the games where he's created this beautiful renders of different scenes. What was that guy, Phil? Remember him?
I don't remember his name. I know who you're talking about. Yeah, he had a whole series of them.
And he did one on Red Dead Redemption that was just absolutely mind-boggling. We reviewed it, I think, on the show
over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. That's the kind of thing that I wish they would have made it easier for people to do, because then you would have had a whole community flocking, not necessarily to play the game, but to shoot inside of the world.
What's really mysterious about that to me is that it seemed like that was Rockstar Games' trajectory, with what they had been doing with GTA 4 and then GTA 5 with the built-in director mode and all of that stuff, those tools were mind-blowing, and they resulted in a very large user base making use of them, and capturing that amazing world, with different videos and stuff. And so to me, it just seemed so logical that they would continue that with Red Dead Redemption 2, which is far and away their most beautiful world they've built so far. And I think has the most possibility. And yeah, just for that to have, clearly they have no intention of doing that.
Yeah, I know.
There's no reason to do it now. The game has been out for too long without it. So it's a strange decision that I've seen people try to get a straight answer from them on Twitter and other places, and it's just a stone wall. So I'm very curious to see with GTA 6, which is in development now. Are they going to continue, to offer those built-in tools and abilities, or are they going to be more combative with their modding community, which is that seems to be kind of the different forces that are pulling on that game.
Yeah.
On one hand, it's open for machinima, and on the other, there's been some real headbutting with modders. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
Dominic Edwards, the director of this film, It Lives Within the Sea. If you're listening to this, let us know how you made it and how you went about doing it. I'd love to interview you too if you happen to be listening to it. Or anybody who knows him, let him know that we'd like to talk to him about RDR2 and his experience of putting it together. But thank you guys a lot for your comments. I just love this little film. It's such a nice and moody kind of film, just the kind of thing I like.
Great picks, both of you films. Great picks, Ricky.
Yeah, I enjoyed them both.
Well, if you all out there watching or listening have some feedback for us, be sure to contact us. Our website is completelymachinima.com. Just look for the talk button, and you can reach out to us by email or other methods, and we will be happy to discuss your feedback here on the air. So thank you all to my co-hosts. This has been a great month and some very interesting picks, and it's the high point of my week to talk with you guys. So thank you very much.
Same here. Happy Halloween, everyone.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.